Okay, welcome everybody. This is Gemstone University presents me, Kenneth Scott, House of Cousins. Seeing with real eyes to realize with awareness the world you are bound in and to, and how to transform it and you into the world you want to live in. So that's our theme, which essentially means we are the means of transformation. As I said yesterday in my talk, we have the power and authority if we choose to bring it back within and as ourselves. Okay? So I was talking to somebody earlier today, actually in this room, a little one-on-one talk, and we were talking about the nature of transformation. Because that's what this is all about, transformation. Anybody here heard the phrase, as above, so below?
Yeah.
Very good. And how about as within, so without?
Absolutely.
All right, you got both sides of it. Okay. Imagine that's a cross, like a Swiss flag cross. But you're only seeing two sides of that, okay? A two-dimensional image. If we were to move it a little bit, and you could see what's behind that two-dimensional cross line, what you would see is two infinity symbols, going like this, as above, so below, and like this, as within, so without. That's the nature of our containment, okay? Because we have allowed ourselves to be put into a containment field that we basically call the legal and monetary system. In law, it's called the civitas, the civil body. In Latin and in the Roman system, the civitas is that, the civil body. It's what contains the mass population. And as I said yesterday, there are only two things necessary for the system that we're in to be implemented. There are several more sort of close behind as the primary, but it's what I call, and what they, meaning them, meaning us, have created in this hologram for thousands and thousands of years, the symbol of the two pillars, the line of the king and the line of the priest. That's all that's necessary to lift us off the land and put us into the civitas and put us as the civil body and utilize us as a battery with our consent. Remember when I talked about yesterday, it's all based on consent. To put us collectively and individually as the battery that creates this hologram. So I talked about it in physical terms, history being the story of law to create the system called money in order to entrain and lift the global population into that containment field, to extract the resources, build the planetary infrastructure as both our prison and as their prize, okay? So there's interesting points there I'm going to come back to, such as the use of the word prize. Does anybody know what that word actually means, technically speaking?
What was the word, sorry?
Prize, okay? Prize. You ever heard of booty and prize? The claims of war on land and sea. Booty of land and prize of the sea. Have you ever heard of something called a letter of marque and reprisal? A couple of you have. A letter of marque and reprisal is a letter issued by a sovereign, a letter patent, which means the highest form of a lawful letter. A letter patent issued by a sovereign who is at war with another sovereign that allows the captain of a ship to essentially do legal piracy, to board the ship of an enemy combatant in order to capture booty and prize on both land and sea. But basically, prize means capture at sea. Okay? So a letter of marque and reprisal means to mark the ship, board it, and essentially loot it for prize. People, persons, cargo, property, whatever is there. Means and methods of war. To reprise it back to the sovereign. And the captain gets to keep part of that prize. And he shares it with his crew. But the majority goes back to the sovereign, because the sovereign needs what? He needs his treasury to be replenished in order to maintain and continue war. So everything in law, everything in the monetary system, everything in things that I will reference here, basically in terms of the construct of the hologram, the language, the symbols, everything is part of the construct that we actually have allowed ourselves to entrain ourselves into this hologram. So when we talk about taking our power and authority back into, within, and as ourselves, we're talking about ceasing the presumption of consent, severing the contracts and the agreements by which they operate. Because they understand, for example, this morning, Amanda, in her talk, talked about free will. She talked about the levels of engagement. Okay, we are free will beings at one level. At the same time, we are completely and absolutely pre-programmed. The depth of mind control and the containment system that I'm talking about goes way deeper than any of you, and I can guarantee that any of you understand yet. Okay? But ultimately, we do have free will, because we are eternal beings with free will. So we have allowed our free will to be abrogated, or we've abrogated it ourselves. We're actually willless in this system. It's actually embodied in what's called the Lord's Prayer, which supposedly were the words of a man called Jesus, which is not true, because the Jesus in the Bible never did exist. Okay? But those words of the Lord's Prayer actually were not put in the language that we understand in the English language until 400 to 500 years ago. The word Lord did not exist thousands of years ago as we understand it. There's only one Lord on this planet. He's called the Lord Mayor of the City of London. Okay? And who is the Father? El Papa. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done. In other words, the Pope, who is in heaven, which is called the city known as Vatican City, which is heaven in their construct. His name, and only his name, is hallowed, okay? Because he is the vicar of Christ. But Christ simply means he who is elevated above the polarity of the mass collective hallucination that we call consciousness, okay? There's always somebody who comes late to class. So they understand the nature of harmonics and entrainment and things of that nature. We'll get into that a little bit. So the whole system that's been structured over the last 2,000 years, built on what was structured the previous 5,000 years, built on what was structured for millions and billions of years, because we have been doing this for billions of years. We have been trapped in this hologram, billions of years. And you know what? It's always been right here. It's not out there. Okay, we'll get to that in a little bit. So the Pope says, I am the vicar of Christ. Who is the Christ? We are, because we are actually creation. We are one and equal with this concept of creating, but we've abrogated our capacity, our power and authority, and our will to create. So they say, he is the vicar of Christ. Meaning, we have given him all that power to be that unified being, that singularity and that unity of creation that we have always been. Okay? So we call him, or they call him, and then in the system of entrainment, billions, at least 1 billion to 2 billion people, in some form or another of Christianity, put it all outside of themselves and create a process of entrainment. Entrainment has something to do with sympathetic resonance. That's why when soldiers march across a bridge, they do it asymmetrically, because if they did it all in sync, they would cause the bridge, the molecular structure of the bridge, to go into sympathetic vibration, and it would blow itself apart, literally. So the science of all of this, understand the nature of harmonics and sympathetic vibration and entrainment to get us to agree to entrain ourselves to project this holographic reality that we think is real. So the Vicar of Christ is our projection of that, and 1 billion or more beings on this planet call him the Father. So our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be your name. Well, how about my name? No, it's just his name, right? Thy will be done. We're projecting collectively our will outside of ourselves. So his will, or the collective will of that which is outside of ourselves, we are saying, yes, your will be done. And there's a reason why I'm saying all this. You will understand by the time we get further into it as to the nature of the entrapment or the containment of the system that we want to be free of. Okay? So thy will be done, or the other way around, thy kingdom come. Okay, thy will be done as on earth as it is in heaven. Heaven being Vatican City, earth being the rest of the globe. Okay, that's all it's about. It's called the Lord's Prayer because the Lord Mayor controls the city of London, which, as I said yesterday, is the embodiment, if you will, of the crown. Okay, I'm condensing tens, if not hundreds of hours of detail into 1 to 2 hours. Okay, so we're just touching on this, and quite frankly, I had no clue what I was actually going to say to begin this, but once I start, it just comes out. Okay, it comes out because we're sitting here as a unified field, so I'm talking to you as beings instead of to your mind, which is the system of the matrix and the control. So this is what you came here for me to say, okay? Period. Another group, I might say something different. So, as I was saying, we're good. Yesterday, there are 3 city-states that are the grounding point of our virtual reality projecting individual and collective projection into this hologram. Because this body has an overlay. People call it the chakra system. It's not what most people think it is. It's not some spiritual thing. It's actually an energy extraction device that we were put into a containment within. Everything that you think you know about all the metaphysical concepts and all the New Age and even the Old Age, the traditional stuff, whether it's in the Bible or it's in channeled material or whatever, that people have spiritualized and said is sacred is nothing more than a description of the prison that we are in. It's kind of like this. If you're in an actual prison cell and there are bars in an equidistant pattern, like that wall, actually this one behind us, okay? In fact, this is a great metaphor, this room. It's got equal, as if those were bars, these lines. So say we're in a prison, and we spent hundreds and thousands and millions and billions of years in it, and things kept being inserted as holographic inserts. And at first it was foreign, but eventually it became normal and natural. And we started putting our power outside of ourselves, and those who had inserted those holographic inserts started adding elements that continued to, create the further gap of our separation from ourselves. And we started spiritualizing it as if there was something outside of us that was a spiritual force, a God or something like that, or a savior who would come and save us. It's always something outside of ourselves, you know. The new version is the UFO brothers or the Ashtar Command or whatever, the Ascension. It's all a variation on the same thing. We've always allowed ourselves to be entrained in these projected belief systems that there's something outside of us that was going to come and save us. But the real clue is the only way out is in. Wherever we have either been told and or accepted that it is the way out is always something outside of ourselves. The system always tells us where we should go, which is the opposite of where we actually should go. So if you've been thinking that you're going to ascend or rapture or rupture or whatever your metaphor is, I'm here to tell you it ain't true, okay? We have to come into our power and our capacity in these bodies and stand within them as a microcosm of the whole microcosm, because it's always that infinity symbol, as above, so below, as within, so without. But you notice if I were to do this so you can see that infinity symbol, it's an infinite loop. It's an infinite mind fuck. Okay, we are fucking ourselves. Excuse the phrase, but that's the truth. Okay? Birth, death, birth, death, birth, death, earth, heaven, earth, heaven, earth, heaven. So we think this life is for the pits, so we want to go to heaven, and heaven's going to be great. We're going to sit up there, whatever our belief system, we're going to be vibrating with, whomever is our particular flavor, and we're going to be saved. But you know what? Heaven is nothing more than another containment system, okay? But I have good news for you, which is that that's already been collapsed, okay? That's why you see the matrix falling apart. So back to the prison, gradually and systematically, incrementally, we have spiritualized these things outside of ourselves. So we've turned our prison into our concept of our pathway to salvation. And now we have all these new flavors, sacred geometry, numerology, astrology, blah, 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 but they're really not new. They've been around for thousands of years. But certain beings were programmed to come into these lives to start becoming resonating capacitors that people were attracted to, because those people were pre-programmed. It's all an energy consumption machine, okay? There's a lot more I could say about that, but essentially that is the underpinning of everything that has to do with the matrix. So, for example, I'm not going to take questions. One other point, for an example, for those of you who were here yesterday, the International Summit, offshore investment and so forth, and there was some very intelligent people up there on stage talking about the code in the Bible, the numerology and all of that, and modern day monetary activity charts and graphs of, you got to go this way and you got to watch for this wedge and this, whatever. That's still part of the prison, okay? The bottom line is all of that is breaking down. We need to start creating the world we want to live in. So that's the title of this talk. We go back to it again. Seeing with real eyes, seeing the reality that we're really in, and realizing with awareness. And that word is used very specifically, not consciousness, because consciousness is part of the containment field. It's the new age, everybody's talking about expanding your consciousness. Well, consciousness is nothing but the creation of our minds. And there's an individual mind consciousness system, and there's a collective mind consciousness system. And it is, in fact, the beast of revelation. And guess who created it? We did. There's nothing outside of us. There is no we versus they, us versus them. We have met the enemy, and it is us, okay? That's the rub, but that's also where the power lies. Because if we take full responsibility for being our own enemy, then we can take it into ourselves and we can transmute it and we can transform it. That's why this is about transforming the world we are bound in. in order to create the world we wish to live in. And the world we wish to bequeath to our children and their children and all the generations to come. And that's really who we all are. You know, anarchy, anarchists, those are just words. We could call ourselves anarchists if we want, but really we are just an individualized expression of creation that we're finally learning that truly united we stand, divided we fall. So what is the primary mode of control in this world for thousands of years? Divide and conquer. But how has that been created? Because we're divided within ourselves. We created a fundamental schism and split and polarization within ourselves billions of years ago that we don't remember. Okay, but we are beginning to remember. And the remembering of that is our process of healing and transformation. And there's symbols and there's layers of that I could go into for hours, literally. Okay? Dismemberment. Okay? You know what that is? Taking your member and separating it from yourself. Not necessarily a gender-specific metaphor, but it can be. So why is the obelisk one of the several primary symbols in the control system of this world? Because there is a myth going back to Egypt about a few players. It's called the Ennead, which means the Council of Nine. At the top of the council was this being called Anu, which in the languages in Egyptian and Sumerian and Babylonian meant numerous things. It meant the Godhead, it meant heaven. There were a group of beings known as the gods who were called the Anunnaki. Okay? So Anu was at the head of this nine configuration, this nine position council. Out of himself, he birthed the four elements of creating the physical reality. And I forget their Egyptian names, but it was basically water, earth, fire, and air. Out of whom was birthed another set of four, two brother-sister twins, Isis and Osiris, Set and Nephthys. Isis and Osiris were the gods of light. Set and Nephthys were the gods of darkness. This is why the Masonic temples and places like Windsor Cathedral and so forth have black and white squares, because the esoteric secret societies training and so forth was done specifically to teach them how to play both against the middle, the dialectic, the polarity. Okay, and this started for our purposes in Egypt. So in the story, Isis and Osiris are the beings of light, and all of the Christ mythology, you know, the prodigal son, the Immaculate Conception, it's all in there and many other places leading up to 2,000 years ago. But in the story, basically, Set, being the evil brother, was jealous of Osiris being the good brother. And so when Isis, the goddess, was off somewhere, Paris, shopping for purses and shoes, Set murdered Osiris, and he dismembered or disarticulated him. He cut him up into 15 pieces, and you'll see this story, some people will say 13, 14, but it was 15. Why? Because if you take the human body and you take each major articulation, you get 3 pieces on each of the 4 limbs. That's 12. Then the hip and the neck, 13 and 14. But in the male, there's a 15th member, the phallus, okay? He was disarticulated and dismembered. This is a metaphor. You can look at the Egyptian, everything, creation stories and so forth. You can look at the Greeks, the Romans. It's all outpictured there. If you study mythology, you will see the reality of the mind construction of the hologram in which we exist, okay? So he was dismembered and he was spread along the Nile, which was a metaphor for our spine. And there are 7 major temples along the Nile, which is the chakra system. And when Isis returned, she went and searched all the pieces and found 14 of the 15 and put him back together. I'll give you one guess which one she didn't find. Okay? But we can expand this from male or female physical bodies or genitalia and all of that, and just look at it simply as the masculine and feminine principle. The masculine principle is directive. The feminine principle is receptive. So there's something called electromagnetic field. It's one of the 4 physical forces in basic physics. So you need both to create. That's why they put them together, electromagnetic field, electromagnetic energy, and so forth. And so what we're talking about here is our willlessness, our dismembering of our capacity to be one and equal with our beingness as creators and part of creation, and separating ourselves from it. That's why we must remember, ground ourselves back into the physical. That's why the number of the beast is 666. Did you ever look at the periodic chart and notice that the one atom that has 6 electrons, 6 protons, and 6 neutrons is carbon? And that's the physical body that we're in, is a carbon-based life form. So it's all about, don't go there. Don't go in your body. Don't remember who you really are. Because if you do, you will have more power and capacity in your individual body that's one and equal with your being than all of the cabal combined. So, Isis put Osiris back together and created a resurrected member, which is symbolized and energetically materialized as the obelisks, which is always put opposite the capital, which is the head. Okay, like in Washington, D.C. and other places. That is the castrated male principle, the decapitated male principle. And with that, she impregnated herself and birthed Horus, who then went to battle with Set and defeated Set, and the light won out, and Horus became, the prodigal son, and he rose, and because the sun rose every day, the Horus rising became the horizon, and because he defeated Set, he would sunset at the end of the day when the light came up. But the problem is, we think the light is what we need to go to. But there are plenty enough people who have died and gone into the light and or all of that kind of stuff, the near-death experiences, primarily Native Americans and other indigenous people who will tell you that's just a recycling center. That's the infinity symbol, okay? Birth and death. You die, they grab your being, they put you in a containment field, and when you're ready, you get rebirthed. And they insert the control systems, the programming, and we live our pre-programmed lives. So this is all, you could see this microcosmically, mesocosmically, macrocosmically. It's all the replicated form over and over again, which means when we re-embody, we remember who we are, and we ground into this physical with our true capacity and our being, then we can create anything. Okay, it's like Neo said at the end of the first Matrix movie. I don't know where this is going to end, but I know where it's going to begin. And he could have been talking about right now, because this is where it begins. This is the year of creation. Okay, we're also in the age of consequences, where all that we have created within these loops of time over and over again must be addressed. So a lot of it is out picturing and all the crap we're seeing, all the collapse and the wars and everything. But at this point, we are standing at the point of creation where we can minimize that and start birthing the world that we want to be. So basically, Pantera, De Oro, and Gemstone, as we have been building it, is one of certainly many vehicles for us to achieve that. What makes us unique, us within our private society, which I will get into in the second half. We'll get into the practical detail of what we have created so far, where we're at, and why we would love to have you join us to help continue to build them. But basically, over my 25 years of studying law and money and all of that, based on the previous 30 years of studying many things, all this metaphysical and esoteric stuff, and science and many things in between, has been to distill it down into the essence of what I know we need to have to transform both ourselves and this world. And it's ours as a gift to create models and prototypes to be replicated, not infinitely, we don't want to go back to that, but eternally, because we are eternal beings. So we'll get into that in the second half. But basically, back to our friends, Isis and Osiris, I could spend the rest of this day going into the detail. I could show you how the Old Testament and the New Testament has exactly been built on that. It's been built on the Egyptian mystery schools. It's very far and wide and deep, and it's been imbued and inculcated and hardwired into our beings and into our minds, and it's what we've accepted and allowed. But awareness with real eyes to see this reality is all we need, and a few other basic tools to transform that. It's simple.